Egypt is building the sixth largest high-speed rail system in the world, and they are making staggering progress. Egyptian footage shows dozens of stations rising near its cities and through the desert. A pathway can be seen being cleared from Ain Sokhna near the Red Sea, straight through the mountains, in order to connect to Egypt's new administrative capital. Then the line will stretch through Cairo, beyond Alexandria, past El Alamein, and finish westward throughout Egypt's north coast up until Marsa Matruh. A second phase has been planned to extend from Cairo all the way down south towards Luxor and Aswan, and there are even talks to build bridges over the Red Sea to connect Egypt's Sinai Peninsula to the network. Over 2,000 kilometers of high-speed rail are to be laid, ranking Egypt number 6 in the world for countries with the most kilometers of high-speed rail, trailing just behind Japan. It is a huge undertaking, not unlike Egypt's massive plans to build a new capital, which is the largest planned city ever. And yet, history has repeatedly shown us that Egyptians are no strangers when it comes to ambitious construction projects. Egypt is the most populated country in the Middle East, boasting a population of 114 million people, which is expected to reach 160 million people by 2050. It is the second largest economy in Africa. As a result, the country is in desperate need for quality infrastructure to facilitate the movement of all its people. Egypt was the first country in Africa to construct a railroad back in the mid-1800s. But what you might have not known is that Egypt has the second oldest rail line in the world. The railway connected Alexandria, Egypt's major port city on the Mediterranean Sea, with the capital, Cairo, and then extended southward along the Nile River to the city of Suez. The completion of Egypt's first railroad brought about profound changes to the country. It facilitated the movement of goods, boosted trade and commerce, and also enabled people to travel more easily and quickly between major cities. Access to rail fostered greater cultural exchange and economic growth, laying the groundwork for Egypt's modernization and development. Over time, Egypt's railroad network expanded, connecting additional cities and regions within the country, and contributing to its integration into the global economy. Moving an average of 1.4 million passengers each weekday, Egyptian rail has one of the highest traffic densities in the world, logging about 360 million passengers per year pre-pandemic. 60% of the 10,000-kilometer network is concentrated in the delta and along the Nile, reaching most of the Egyptian population, including fairly small cities and towns. It is a reliable form of transportation, even for the third of Egyptians living below the poverty line. But since its inception, Egypt's railroad infrastructure has deteriorated considerably. Hundreds of train accidents occur every year, and train derailments are not uncommon. Illegal crossings, old locomotives, and the theft of train tracks have left the system struggling. Egypt lost 7 billion Egyptian pounds in 2017 as a result of thefts of tracks on its railway, according to Al Arabi Al Jadid. The Egyptian Railways Commission monitors and governs the country's rail system. It has been forced to replace the stolen tracks in order to allow trains to continue running. Following the thefts in 2017, at least 7 train accidents took place across Egypt, the majority as a result of missing tracks and equipment which had been stolen. The system is in desperate need of an upgrade, and to be fair, the Egyptian government has reinvested back into their light regional rail lines. New Talgo trains have been commissioned to increase efficiency and safety. Passengers also now experience brand new stations upon entrance and exit, and the overall system just looks a lot better than it did a few years ago. However, Egypt is not stopping there. The Egyptian government is seeking a transportation revolution, and that is exactly what it is getting. In 2018, Egypt announced its intentions to build a state-of-the-art high-speed rail system that can connect the country while also withstanding the country's dry climate. Egypt's National Authority for Tunnels, a government agency under the Ministry of Transportation, has awarded a record $23 billion contract to a consortium including Germany's Siemens Mobility and local Egyptian firms Arascom Construction and the Arab contractors for a planned 2,000-kilometer high-speed electrified rail line. Siemens is a tech conglomerate that has proven that it can provide custom rail and tram networks that can function either in the harsh Qatari heat or in the bitter Russian cold. Egypt seeks to work with an experienced manufacturer, and as a result, the country has signed a memorandum of understanding with a German industrial giant. This is the biggest contract in Siemens' history, with the share of the German conglomerate amounting to around $8.7 billion. Siemens will provide 41 Velara high-speed trains, 94 Desiro high-capacity regional trains, and 41 Vectron electric freight locomotives. According to Siemens President and CEO Roland Busch, This is the largest order in the company's history. $23 billion is no small sum for Egypt. The entire budget for the government is around $97 billion a year, so they're investing nearly 25% of their annual budget on this thing. Imagine for a second if America invested 25% of their annual budget on high-speed rail. 25% of $6.1 trillion, which was America's budget in 2023, would be $1.5 trillion. Do you feel it yet? The unutilized potential and improvement of our society at large? The ability to see that cousin of yours in another state with no vehicle traffic, no TSA, and no need to wait for that one obnoxious guy on the plane to unwedge his monstrous carry-on from the overhead compartment. Alas, it's time to head out of dreamland and to settle back into our sad, sad reality. Phase 1 of the project entails construction of 660 kilometers of rail with at least 18 stations. Orascom and the Arab contractors will carry out the tunneling and the track laying works for the line that will link the port city of Ain Sokhna on the Red Sea to Alexandria and Marsa Matruh on the Mediterranean Sea, according to Siemens. Egypt's National Authority for Tunnels will construct the bridges and facilitate sub-construction for the project, which is expected to create a total of 18,800 jobs. The new line will reduce current travel time by half and increase Egypt's volume of freight via rail by 15%, up from the current 1.9%. To help understand this 1.9% number, consider that over 96% of freight in Egypt is transported by trucks, worsening traffic on an already stressed roadway infrastructure. This means that this additional freight capacity in the new high-speed rail will not only decrease congestion by reducing the amount of cars on the road, but also by reducing truck traffic, since more freight will travel by rail. The project will also reduce overall energy usage and air pollution by cutting emissions by at least 70% in comparison to the current emissions from car and bus transportation, according to Orascom. The consortium has also been awarded a 15-year maintenance contract for the track works and telecommunication system. Siemens will install the power supply system and the line's signaling system based upon modern computer-based interlocking technology. The consortium is also planning 2 additional line extensions with a combined length of 1,140 kilometers that will connect the greater Cairo metropolitan region with the cities of Aswan and Luxor in southern Egypt near Sudan, and then branch out to another eastern extension to Gharda'a up into the Red Sea near Safaya. Overall, the project will provide over 2,000 kilometers of high-speed rail with 60 stations spread around the country, according to Siemens. Significant progress has been made, with Egypt literally moving mountains to get the job done. Impressively, many stations have already had their locations selected and their concrete foundations constructed. I mean, just look at it. You could see the progress and the endgame vision. So, from the perspective of an American who sees Egypt's consistent progress, one is left wondering, why is the US lagging so far behind in the race for high-speed rail? When it comes to technological advancement, you would not be mistaken to think of the United States as a pioneer. Historically, the US emerged as a world power not only due to its OP geographic location, but simply because it was a first mover in terms of constructing highways and paved roadways. Under President Eisenhower's Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956, other countries realized the economical advantages of roadway infrastructure and quickly started developing their own highway systems. One can even look back further in history, when the United States had the most sophisticated rail systems in the world, complemented with an abundant supply of horses to provide sufficient public transit. But when it comes to modern railways and public infrastructure, America hosts nothing short of neglected systems. The United States ranks 12th in terms of passengers carried by rail transport per year. Now when you think about efficient trains, the United States just doesn't come to mind. Simply put, America isn't really that serious about efficient passenger transport via rail, and the idea of high-speed rail? Forget it. The Gen Z and millennial generations can only dream of an America connected by quality high-speed rail. It is also important to note that the US has one of the most expansive freight rail systems in the world. America relies on freight trains to carry nearly 28% of the country's freight. However, American freight is dominated by 4 companies: BNSF, Union Pacific, CSX, and Norfolk Southern. These are profit-driven companies who only bother improving anything if it would improve their bottom line. Some Americans even consider the feasibility of renationalizing the freight railroads in order to change the way we view track infrastructure and treat it more like how we treat the USPS as a service. But for now, Americans are stuck with the oligopolies calling the shots. And because of this, high-speed rail bullet trains cannot run on the current tracks. Even freight cannot really run efficiently on the current tracks if we're being honest. Just look at the record for freight rail. The tracks physically can't handle more trains because the current lines are already busy with all of the freight. And since the freight companies who own them rarely reinvest back into their own systems, the capacity just isn't enough. The current system is already struggling as is. If America wanted high-speed rail, it would need to follow in the footsteps of Egypt and build new rail tracks from scratch. There exists one line in the United States that can be considered high-speed rail, the Acela fleet, which is a 457-mile railway line, a series of 12 intermediate stops stretching from Boston to Washington that is capable of reaching speeds up to 150 miles per hour. However, due to its frequent stops and zones where the trains are restricted to 25 miles per hour, the Acela trains average 68 miles per hour. Objectively speaking, it is one of the worst high-speed rail services in the world. And on top of this, it is crazy expensive when compared to its competition in Asia and Europe. Acela only carried 2.9 million passengers in the 2023 fiscal year, while other railway services around the world carry billions annually. Now, some people might be curious as to why I haven't mentioned Brightline yet. And my reasoning is that I see high-speed rail as a quality form of public transit that is affordable and accessible to the general public, not simply treated as a public attraction. Brightline's fares range from $84 up to $164 for a one-way ticket from Orlando to Miami, making it even more expensive than the Acela. Brightline is a privatized company, and they not so subtly want to keep poor people off in order to present the service as a high-quality experience. And that is the opposite of what public transportation should aim to achieve. Even though they use some public funds to build it, the service is not intended for the general public. Brightline's private transportation is not the vision of what Gen Z and millennials envision for the country. Another reason is that the Brightline trains can reach speeds up to 150 miles per hour, just under the informal threshold for high-speed rail. And while there is no single international standard that applies worldwide, their trains only average 69 miles per hour, nearly matching Acela's speeds of 68 miles per hour. The two services share many of the same problems in terms of their practicality, affordability, accessibility, and the train's right-of-way. Even the time or day you buy a ticket matters, just like airline tickets. And it's why I can't genuinely call these services quality high-speed rail. To give you more of a full picture, the American government recently released a plan called Corridor ID, which aims to upgrade its current passenger rail services. But in reality, it just gave a few $1 billion to Brightline and Acela for their high-speed rail projects, and the rest is just a few $100,000 or maybe $1 million to give the current regional rail lines a facelift, which isn't really a bad thing by any means, but it's also nothing revolutionary. It's just the bare minimum that you'd expect from the government. And Acela and Brightline have their own issues to resolve, so it's not like they are going to change the game anytime soon. It's honestly a shame, because the United States is not a poor country by any means, but to the people in power, quality high-speed rail meant for public use is just not a priority. The United States is deceivingly massive, often overlooked in its sheer enormity. Covering approximately 9.8 million square kilometers, it sprawls from the Atlantic to the Pacific, boasting an array of landscapes and climates. To grasp its magnitude, it's helpful to note that it's nearly 40 times the size of the United Kingdom and over twice the size of India. To further grasp its scale, consider that it's roughly equivalent to the combined land area of all 28 European Union countries. Additionally, with a population exceeding 330 million people, it ranks as the third most populous nation globally. Connecting all the people who inhabit the United States through public transportation presents an immense challenge. With such a vast territory and varying population densities spread across cities, suburbs, and rural areas, designing an efficient and comprehensive transportation network is no small feat. Consider that the United States has over 4 million miles of roads and highways, making it the largest road network globally. However, despite the extensive road infrastructure, many regions still lack efficient public transportation options, leaving residents reliant on personal vehicles. With a more conspiratorial outlook, one can even ponder whether or not the airline or auto industries would ever want for there to be a feasible public transportation option. They directly benefit from there being no alternative except for the use of their products. After all, bribery is called lobbying in Washington, D.C., and it's pretty much the name of the game. We have seen time and time again that these big players are more than willing to manipulate the scenes behind closed doors in order to get what they want and keep things as they are. However, disparities in access to public transportation disproportionately affect marginalized communities, exacerbating issues of social and economic inequality. According to a Harvard study, access to public transportation is the single most important factor on an individual's ability to escape poverty. Altogether, bridging the geographical and socioeconomic divides through accessible and reliable public transportation remains a monumental task. Due to its sheer size, it's often cheaper and easier for Americans to fly from one end of the country to the other. And if their destination is close enough to not require a flight, most Americans would just prefer to drive a car. California is working on the California High-Speed Rail project, which aims to connect major cities in the state, including San Francisco, Los Angeles, and San Diego, all with a high-speed rail network. Californians initially voted for the project back in 2008, and while the project has faced various challenges and delays, it represents one of the most ambitious high-speed rail endeavors in the country. Construction finally began on the initial segment in the Central Valley in 2015, but progress was slow and plagued by delays. Overall, the project can only be seen as a net positive for the state and the country. Now, to clarify, it's not my intention to slander or badmouth the idea of high-speed rail in any locality. After all, the project already gets a pretty bad rap and has been the focus of an overabundant and unfair amount of media attention and criticism. I only intend to explain why the US is lagging behind. And lag behind they do. The projected completion dates for California high-speed rail continue to be pushed back, and the total cost of the project continues to climb. And infrastructure projects of any kind will only get more expensive the more we wait. The full San Francisco to Los Angeles project was initially estimated to cost around $33 billion, but has now jumped to between $98 billion and $128 billion. Over 800 miles of track will need to be laid for this project. In comparison, Egypt's network will span over 1,242 miles when it's completed. This means that Egypt's spending $23 billion for approximately 55% more rail for less than a fifth of the cost of what California is spending. Another factor that is unique to Egypt as a country that California cannot rival is that most Egyptians live on only 4% of the land, the very same 4% of the land in which the track is being built, meaning that the high-speed rail will be accessible to over 90% of Egyptians. The same cannot be said about California, or most other countries with high-speed rail for that matter. California is the most populated state in America, with over 39 million residents. So you would think that if high-speed rail could work in any state, it'd be California. After all, 94% of Californians live in urban areas. So choosing where the stations should be a pretty easy task. Just pick the most populated cities in Cali and connect them. So how is California handling it? Well, on their website, they have proposals for 12 of the 24 station locations. But only half of those 12 stations will be located in cities that are included in the top 10 most populated urban areas in California. Critics argue that the projected ridership figures are overly optimistic. If actual ridership falls short of expectations, the financial sustainability of the high-speed rail is at risk. One of the biggest obstacles for the project is that it has struggled to secure consistent and sufficient funding. The federal government, state funds, and private investments have all been sources, but funding gaps still remain, jeopardizing timely and efficient completion. The project has faced numerous delays, pushing back the expected completion dates significantly. Initially expected to be operational by 2020, the timeline has been extended multiple times, now aiming for partial completion in the 2030s. Political support for the project has fluctuated, impacting funding and prioritization. Changes in administration and differing political agendas at state and federal levels have led to inconsistent support. California also shot itself in the foot by publishing the land parcels that will need to be purchased to clear the route, and they don't even acquire the land until they're far enough along to need it. This lag in acquisition means that they will always end up paying above market rates to secure the route. It costs a fortune in legal fees for the government to acquire land, so normally they offer a hefty premium over market value to encourage you to sell, which they call the commercial offer. In order to speed things along, California decided to build in phases, building the middle section first because it was the easier and cheaper option, and slowly build out towards the major cities, with land progressively getting more expensive as it nears San Francisco and Los Angeles. Egypt does not have this problem. A significant portion of the land on which the route will be built on was already an uninhabited desert. This means that appeasing any property owners in the much more fertile Nile Delta quickly becomes much more affordable, because only the land in the fertile delta and the surrounding metropolitan area would come with a more significant price tag. High-speed rail can have a significant impact on a country's economy, but the exact figures can vary depending on factors such as the size of the network, the level of investment, and the overall economic conditions. Studies have shown that high-speed rail can stimulate economic growth through various channels, such as increased productivity, job creation, and tourism. For example, a study by the International Union of Railways found that for every euro invested in high-speed rail, a return of 4 euros in economic benefits would be generated. But for some reason, American politicians seem to have already decided that a massive infrastructure investment is not even feasible. Consider that an effective high-speed rail network connecting America will physically require more miles of rail. And as a result, the construction of all the track and the electrification that it requires will necessitate a lot of maintenance. A country such as Egypt or Spain is more densely populated, so not only can more of the population conveniently use it, but the high-speed rail can connect most of the nation without needing to build an absurd amount of track, minimizing the burden of the maintenance payments and making high-speed rail more worthwhile for the nation and its taxpayers. The idea of an America with high-speed rail would require serious change from the highest level, demanding that politicians and investors focus on improving the American experience. Change would also need to be made all the way down to the foundational level of the country. American taxpayers would need to not only support the project financially and politically, but also be willing to use it upon its completion in order to secure its financial stability. Unfortunately, America is anything but stable as of lately. And because we are more divided than we have ever been, it is not reasonable to assume that the country is even able to take on a decades-long infrastructure megaproject. Regardless, other countries are waking up to the necessity of high-speed rail and the benefits that it provides for society and its economy. Morocco was the first nation in Africa to commission a high-speed rail line. Its El Bouraq line is a 323-kilometer railway that can reach speeds up to 320 kilometers per hour, making it the fastest train in Africa. The network links Tangier, Rabat, and Casablanca with trains that leave every hour. Fares are competitive when compared to European standards. A ticket from Tangier to Rabat costs around $31, and the journey takes 1 hour and 20 minutes. In comparison, a similar journey in northwest Spain on high-speed rail from Vigo to A Coruña takes around 1 hour and 20 minutes, and fares cost around $29, demonstrating that African infrastructure investments can directly compete with their European neighbors. Whether or not the United States decides to invest in high-speed rail remains uncertain, and only time will reveal the outcome. Various factors, including political will, funding availability, and public demand will shape this decision. While proponents argue for its potential benefits in reducing congestion and emissions, skeptics raise concerns about its high cost and feasibility. Ultimately, the future of high-speed rail in the United States hinges on a complex interplay of these factors, and only the passage of time will provide a definitive answer. Until then, the question of whether or not the United States builds high-speed rail remains open-ended. Regardless of the outcome of Egypt's other significant megaprojects, the decision to build high-speed rail holds immense potential for propelling the country forward. This transformative infrastructure project not only promises to enhance domestic connectivity, but also positions Egypt as a regional leader in transportation innovation. If the high-speed rail is a success, it could catalyze economic growth, foster tourism, which Egypt benefits greatly from, and improve overall quality of life for Egyptians. By embracing high-speed rail, Egypt demonstrates its readiness to embrace the challenges and opportunities of the 21st century, and I, for one, am excited to witness its completion. If you learned something from this video, make sure to subscribe to Mosaic Insights for similar content about geopolitics and more. This is my first upload, and I've learned so much making this video. I'm a one-man team, so I'd very much appreciate your support for the channel. Check out my Patreon in the description below to get exclusive access to sneak peeks to future videos. If you have any topics you'd like for me to cover, mention them in the comments below, along with any thoughts you had about Egypt's high-speed rail. Thanks for watching.